honestly do need to fail a lot. You need to feel that sense of failure so that you start to figure out how to move past it, so that you know that it's not the end of the world. I mean, I've failed on so many things, but then it's just like, go back now, let me go back, what can I do next? When you're starting out, that's why you want to find a mentor. You're hoping they have that answer for you. Usually they don't have the answer, but they can help guide you on to get there. But it's not always a guarantee that it's going to be solved. Like, oh, if I take this mentorship, everything's going to be solved.
In this episode, I talk with Patrick Ballesteros. He's known for his illustrative, cartoony style. And in this episode, we talk about his thoughts on finding his style and making a living as an artist. We also go a bit into his background, which is at places that are more academic, like the Watts Atelier, and his thoughts on deviating from something that's more traditional and academic towards something more cartoony. Also, if you'd like to support me, consider checking out the links to the courses below in the description. All of this content is sponsored by me, so your guys' support really does help me make more content like this. Thanks, and enjoy the episode. The purpose of this is not to talk about how to become an artist, how to train, or any of that kind of stuff. It's more about the why of doing it. And when we've talked before, it's like, you trained at Watts, and you've had some academic training, but in a lot of ways have like carved your own path for yourself artistically and creatively. And I'm not saying it's contrarian to academic training, but it's like not exactly what you would expect from doing that sort of stuff. And I guess I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about that.
I mean, academically, I think there's still a lot of people still going like the 4-year college route.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, directly from high school, I think it's partly because that's what their counselors know.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, you do this. Oh yeah, here's an art school here. But do they know specifically if that art school is good for that student? No, they just know you're into art. Okay, here's an art school.
Yeah.
So I think that's still going on. But now you do have, because of COVID and the pandemic, all these art schools, all these people doing their own thing, opening up online left and right. So it's easier and it's harder now to carve that path. Right. I think for me, going to Watts, for San Diego, that was the only thing.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah,
that was the only art school, and this was what early 2000s.
Yeah.
Like I think that's when I started going there, like 2001 or 2002.
Yeah.
Where I met like Stan and Ron and Jeff and Eric and all of them. So, in a way, that restriction made it a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
To go, okay, this is the path.
Right.
But what that allowed me to do is actually it opened up a little bit of that art world. Like, oh, this person, what is concept art?
Yeah.
And they introduced that to me. Like, oh, okay, there's concept art for games. I didn't know what that was. I thought I had to just do illustration. And no, there's this.
Right.
And I think that made me hunt things down a whole lot more. Was YouTube around? I think YouTube.
I'm pretty sure it was just starting out.
It was just starting out.
I don't know if there was much art stuff on there.
Yeah, there wasn't at all. It was just videos. I think people were just uploading random stuff. It was just like the blossoming of YouTube, the start of it. There was none of that accessible, really. I think the biggest thing we had were like the Nomen DVDs that you would get, and they were $75 each.
Right.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
When you think about it now.
It's totally
like a class now.
Yeah.
But yeah, each one was $75, and what you would do is you would say, because you couldn't preview them. They would just show maybe an excerpt when you buy it, but you didn't know how good it was. So you would go in with a few friends. Each of you would buy one, and then you would share it. Yeah. Or like make a copy of it. Yeah. Whoever had that tech. Yeah. But even then, that was it too.
Right.
It was just the Nomen DVDs that had concept art, illustration, Watts, and then from there, it made me really search for like, okay, well, who's teaching this stuff? Yep. Who's out there? Because no one had like an online school, really. No one was releasing any material, any art or whatever. So you had to ask word of mouth. And I think it made it easier. Right. Because I'm asking artists, I'm asking my friends, and they've kind of vetted it for me. They're like, oh yeah, I really learned a lot from this. It's like, well, I trust you. You're really good. All right, let me try that workshop. Yeah. And so I think that's what kind of led me down I wouldn't say unorthodox path, but down that path, which is like the typical 1ABC, 2ABC. It's like, no, I had a hole in my figure drawing. I went to Watts, got to a certain point. Oh, I need to learn a little bit more. Where can I go? Right. And then that's what led me to ask more questions. Yeah. And I think that's the most important thing when you're starting out is asking the questions. And this is where I come back to now with everything out there, with like YouTube online videos. It's harder to figure out what kind of questions should I be asking.
Yeah. Because there's not like you have you have everything to watch.
Exactly.
Right? You could do everything.
Exactly.
Well, and it's part of the reason why I'm trying to talk to so many people, because I think nowadays your like understanding who you are and what your identity is way more important than it was, 50 years ago, because there's less, there's way more, there are way more options, And I think that ability to ask questions and settle on things and just doing things, that's the actual way of like finding your style or becoming a better draftsman or any of that kind of stuff, because you're actually genuinely interested in solving the problem of like, oh, I want to draw a comic. Like, how do I draw figures to actually make that happen? Or how do I draw in perspective because I want to do storyboards, And that's, in general, a lot like more interesting a problem to solve if you're interested in those things than like, I have to learn what the radial brachialis is or something.
Yes.
And again, I think it's like all about trying to trust yourself essentially and your own personal interests.
It's hard though when you're not sure, especially when you're starting out. That's why you want to find a mentor, or you're searching for that mentor because you're hoping they have that answer for you. And it's usually they don't have the answer, but they can help guide you on to get there. Right. But it's not always a guarantee that it's going to be solved. Like, oh, if I take this mentorship, everything's going to be solved.
Right.
And right now, a lot of the mentorships that I see, they're focused.
Yeah.
So that they can get results, so that they can get more people coming into mentorships, because it's still a business.
Yeah.
You are helping people. If you're doing a mentorship, you generally want to educate and help people, but also you gain paid for your time, your expertise.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the mentorships that I see, the goal is pretty clear: mentorship or a portfolio to get into whatever school,
art center
or something like that, or everything is geared towards to get into whatever, to get into this.
Right.
So I think a lot of the specific mentorships that I see, they're successful because of that.
I think mentorship is actually incredibly important. I think it's one of the essential parts of becoming like a professional artist or something.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you'll have people to guide you, but it's ultimately up to the student or whoever, like us as individuals, to actually go to the next step and like put in the work, to actually go and like do the studies, or to, try out different things, make full illustrations. And, that is like mostly work that's done on your own, just in your apartment.
It's different now. I think students are very different nowadays too.
Yeah.
And I don't know what exactly it is or why. I'm not saying that they're not hard workers, but I think because the accessibility of things was so hard when a lot of us were coming up as artists, that we were willing to work hard, go that extra mile, sacrifice, a little bit of sleep, sacrifice, going out with your friends. And I'm not saying that you cannot have a balance, but you have to have a priority in what you want to do. And
absolutely. Well, again, it's part of the reason why I think it's so important to know yourself. And like the thing that I ask, I'm trying to figure out like the why to doing all this stuff. And like there's the actual wanting of do the art, which is like obvious. It's like everyone wants to do something cool. They want to make something that impresses people, But I think most of art, I think, is actually pretty painful.
Oh yeah.
You're like, there's like 1 to 5% of it is like, oh man, I'm so happy, everyone loves me. Then 95% of it is like, oh man, this is horrible. I made a mistake.
Yeah.
I should have been a doctor.
Yep.
And I think, if you don't have like the reasons figured out to why you're willing to suffer through all of that, it is hard to maintain the work ethic to get to the point where you are able to make it like a full-time business or something.
Yeah.
And I suspect like in your own life, it's like, having friends and family and like having hobbies outside of art, keeping it balanced, like doing other things other than just drawing is like an important step to actually doing the art, right? Mm-hmm. I'd assume so to a degree.
My family is the thing that pretty much grounds me, because they always see me working.
Yeah.
Even my son knows, like, oh, you're working again. And part of that makes me do realize, like, yeah, I need to pull back and find a little bit more balance.
Yeah.
But that's all I've known. That's kind of me. Like, if I'm not drawing, people ask, what's your hobby? Drawing.
Yeah.
If you're not doing this, what are you doing? No, I'm actually just thinking about what I could draw next.
Yeah.
And I think that's just how I've always been. It's nothing where I was trained to do that, where I saw other people doing that. It's just how I've always been since I was a kid.
Yeah.
So where that balance comes in is definitely you have to create and carve out that time.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part.
Right.
So making time for family, it may sound like, oh, you should always make time, or like, yeah, you're supposed to make time. it's not as easy, especially if you have that artist heart, that artist ego.
Absolutely.
It always kicks in like, oh, I could be doing this right now, or I could be doing that right now.
Right.
And that's where, unfortunately, you can't take your family for granted. And that's the thing that I'm striving hard not to do. It's hard, but I'm always trying to be mindful of that so that we do take family trips.
Yeah.
I do and I credit my wife to making sure that we're doing those things, because she's not an artist, and that was the main thing. Is I knew that if I was going to get involved or marry someone, it would not be an artist, because that's where I knew like I need that balance. We can't have two people doing that,
right?
But as you were saying, going out and experiencing things, it's super important, because if you're just in your own little hole, your own little cave
in your world,
you're going to be regurgitating the same thing over and over again.
Absolutely. And I think it takes, to some degree, it takes a huge amount of sacrifice. It's like, because like you want to be an artist and have a family and do all these other things, you can't go skiing in, Norway or something, because that would just take too much time, and you have to be okay not, going to Antarctica, or you have to be okay not being an actor or pursuing other things. And you kind of have to, settle with your own identity,
Yeah, that's the hardest part.
I think so. Actually,
it's really hard.
Well, it's not the actual drawing that's the hard part. It's the settling on whatever you want to be, right?
Yes, yes. Like, oh, but I could do this and I could do that, and it's like you have different versions of you on your shoulder pulling you, like, no, do this, no, do that. So it's like, which one do you listen to?
Right.
That's the hard part.
You have no idea.
You have no idea. And a lot of it is like just poking around, seeing, like, going, you're basically in a dark room just feeling around for like, where's the light switch, which way can I go without bumping into something.
Well, and I guess for people that don't that aren't familiar with you and your artwork, I will go to conventions, and your booth will consistently be one that's like super packed, And I think a lot of people on the outside might be like, oh, how do you get there? There must be like an obvious like path to getting there. And your answer of like, oh, you just putter around and you just kind of feel your way through the darkness is actually how you get there.
It is.
And it's like, you couldn't even begin to explain how to replicate that,
No, it's, if you could, then people would be selling that. That's what people try to do, is they'll try to market lightning in a bottle in their certain ways and their marketing ways, but it's not like that. It's the only thing that I could say is, consistency and a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of things that I put out there but that haven't worked, but the thing is, it's like, okay, it didn't work, shoot, let me move on to the next one. And you try something else, you kind of keep moving in different directions,
absolutely,
until you find that one thing, and then hopefully people dig it, then you can do something similar or move on from there. But you're building a core group of supporters that are like, oh, okay, what's Patrick going to do next? Or what's this artist going to do next? But it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, every once in a while, there's virality and things, especially nowadays. Something goes like, oh my gosh, we're going to, But I don't want to be just a viral thing. Like, I want to have this thing of being consistent so people know what to expect. They know that if he's putting a project out, that, man, he put a lot into that, and there's a lot of thought and heart and things like that. And I think that's what I try to do with, especially the people that come by, the people that support, is truly engage with them.
Absolutely. And I think in general, it's like the idea of virality is actually completely unsustainable.
It's not.
And I've talked to Stan about it a lot. It's like, he's gotten lucky a few times, but if he didn't capitalize on that luck with just lots of work, lots of tedious work, like editing videos, doing these long drawings, and writing scripts about anatomy, it would have been like meaningless, right? And it's like, I think people, again, on the outside looking in, look at somebody with like 100,000, 50,000, 500,000 followers, and they're like, oh, they've made it, they must make a boatload of money, they must be extremely comfortable, all that kind of stuff. No, it's not the case. It's a lot more complicated than that.
I mean, I like to say, I can say this, that I've never paid for followers or anything like that. It's all organic. And I appreciate and I probably, maybe, if I'm lucky, 1% of that organic crew will see my work nowadays. But that's the thing, is the numbers, they don't equate to people that come out to support. People that will support online when you have a sale or when you're doing something new. It doesn't equate to that. I'm fortunate that I've actually found like a core support group within that, of how many followers I have. I know that there are people that are consistently looking, watching, resharing my stuff.
Right.
And that's kind of what I think about who am I engaging with. I'm engaging with those people that I see out there.
Well, and it's you just genuinely being yourself too, you know?
Yeah.
It's not like, it's like you actually genuinely enjoy drawing cartoony stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And a question that I ask everybody is like, would you be doing the same thing right now if you had $1 billion? And it's like, I say this on every podcast, but like I couldn't pay you to stop drawing. I couldn't pay you to stop creating stuff. You know? You might do it at a larger scale. You know, you might like make a theme park or something, but it's essentially the same thing across the board. You know,
Totally.
And I guess again, it's like when it comes to people trusting themselves, I think they need exposure to an art school. You know, to like show them it's even possible to become an artist.
Yeah.
Having people like, you know, Eric saying, oh, you know, you can do a really nice figure drawing if you put this amount of time in or something. But then, at a certain point, it takes like stepping outside of the school and just kind of, like experimenting and stuff.
Experimenting, the hardest part is stepping out of your comfort zone. I think especially as you establish yourself more and more, it becomes harder to do that.
Yeah.
So definitely early on in your career, just try different things as much as possible. Not saying you can't do it as you get older, but it gets harder because time's the commodity. That's what everyone says, and it's true. And I think for me right now, you know, just luckily because there's stuff online, I can at least listen and learn to different people's different theories, different things. And I think that's for like the next step for me is at least trying to, if I can't take a physical class, I at least need to listen or dive into another class that gives me information, kind of makes things fresh.
Yeah, and be exposed to it. And I think it's like setting aside that time intentionally to be like, especially for students, to be like, you know, life is becoming overwhelming. I have all these other things to do, but I'm still going to set aside 15 minutes or 20 minutes to create something. And it doesn't have to be drawing; it could be playing music.
Yeah. I mean, you honestly do need to fail a lot.
Yeah,
because you need to feel that sense of failure, so that you start to figure out how to move past it.
Yeah.
You figure out not necessarily kind of in a way to how to deal with it. Right. So that you know that it's not the end of the world.
Right.
I mean, I've failed on so many things, but then it's just like, okay, go back then. Let me go back. Let me keep going. What can I do next?
Well, it's like I think everybody who's creative is going to continue to keep failing on things.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you're done failing.
No.
I mean, I'm not done failing, you know. And I think, again, like going back to the idea of followers and business stuff, like, you know, if you have 100,000 people, 100,000 people are not going to buy something from you. It's like 0.001%. So you're like a successful thing is 0.001%.
Yeah.
It's not like you're really trying to get, you know, 1 million people or 10 million people or something. It's just a very small portion of the population that you're trying to have success with.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing a lot of people, and it's including myself, we don't realize is like, we're not out there to please everyone. There's like however many billion people in the world. You can't please all of them.
Well, and I think most will actually not like whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
You know? I think that's the rough part about being an artist is that you put yourself out there and most people don't like you. You know?
It's hard. It's hard. I mean, especially being younger and putting your stuff out there, it just seeing like either no response or like getting a troll remark. Yeah. Even now when I get troll remarks, I'm like, really? Yeah. You have to take the time to like go on my page and do that? It's like...
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it feels like it's part of it. Like I'm getting to the point where I'm getting a lot more like, you know, you're an idiot or, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, like I get it. You know, somebody's like in a rough place, but you know, I think it's you know, the more stuff that you create and the more it's seen by people, the easier it is to critique or tear it down.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, it's always been like that. Right. Yeah. I mean, just putting yourself out there. I mean, actors get it all the time, movies and stuff like that. Not saying at that scale, but yeah, like you were saying, when that happens, this is what a lot of my friends or people that I see at cons say, like, well, you know, you made it then if people are like starting to tear you down.
Absolutely.
Like, all right,
cool. I tell people like, oh man, I got my first hater. I'm like, I made it and stuff. And well, I feel like that's another part about trying to be a creative person professionally is that it doesn't get easier as you get older. Like it gets harder. Like, you know, at first you're just worrying about being a good artist, just making good images. And then next you're worried about like, okay, how do I like actually like sell this? How do I get a job at like a studio or something? And then if you go independent, you're like, okay, how do I like print how do I make books? How do I print prints? You know, how do I distribute figures or something? And then you're worried about taxes and employees and all that kind of stuff. And it's like the levels of complexity keep going higher and higher and higher to the point where it's hard.
Yeah,
you know?
the more successful or the more endeavors, the larger scale.
Right.
I mean, it gets out there. And especially now, I know, there's a lot of young artists or a lot of artists in general, with AI being worried about that as well. That's like another thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The pile on top of everything else.
Right. Well, yeah, I think, I've mentioned this a lot before, but it's like, I think AI is scary for a lot of people, but I think ultimately the scarier thing is your own mortality, It's like, I think AI is just one reason not to draw, but then there's like, when you really zoom out, there's like, essentially like an infinite amount of, like, it's not that hard to find a reason not to draw, Yeah. In the same way that it's like, it's easier to, if humans thought logically, not emotionally, everyone should just be lawyers, but that's just not how things work, There is a pretty large emotional component to how we all make decisions. And I think that just the idea of you wanting something is enough to justify the time spent doing it.
Yeah.
Like, I've been playing Baldur's Gate and I've been rollerblading a lot. And, from one perspective, it's like, oh, I should be editing videos, or I should be trying to make, some print or something to sell at conventions or whatever. But, like, if that's in some ways like what I'm really wanting to do, letting myself play in that way, I think is like actually good for my mental health and good for my brain versus being on all the time.
Yeah.
But
oh man, it's tiring.
Yeah.
Just being on all the time.
Yeah.
Whether you're a teacher or at cons and stuff like that. Seriously, I talked to some of my artist friends too. After cons, we are socially drained.
Yeah.
For me, it's like I can't talk to anyone for at least a month or two.
Yeah.
Or if I do, it'd be like, oh, hey, how's it going? All right, I'm going to go now.
Yeah.
That's about it, because it's that engagement. And it's not because we're being fake. It's because being genuinely interested, and that's what we are, and trying to have like an actual conversation with someone.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time to cancel out everything else to kind of hone in and focus and just say, hey, how are you doing today?
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that I think a lot of, if you see a lot of successful artists, it's either they have a team of people doing that, or they themselves are like that.
Yeah, they have a crazy amount of energy.
They have a crazy amount of energy, and that's when you go to cons and you see the people signing autographs and stuff.
Yeah.
There are some people that are just super super cool.
Like,
just like we'll chat, like cool. And then I was like, okay, cool,
right,
sign.
Yeah,
it's just a buck.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think part of that as well is like, like actually being genuine is also realizing that people aren't just happy-go-lucky beings all the time. There is an element of like, I get grumpy. I get kind of frustrated, and like I think if you deny that side of yourself, there actually are consequences to that. Like you just feel like it bottles up in some way.
And so this past San Diego Comic-Con, I was dealing with horrible leg injury.
Oh, jeez.
I basically got like a bacterial infection, so my ankle and knee had swollen up. So every day was like a fight just to put on a sock, put on my pants, and get out there.
Right.
And I was still kind of going up and down, but I would stop every once in a while, and I'd just be like, F.
This is hard.
I would lean on one of the volunteers. They would see it.
Right.
The crowd would see it. And so I wasn't trying to hide anything there. I was just trying to, I'm cool. I'll keep going. This is just once a year type of thing. But being that vulnerable was hard.
Yeah.
Because I don't like doing that.
Right.
But it was just like, I'm not going to muscle through this. I try, but it's like, and people understood. Like I would post on Instagram, say, hey, sorry if I was a little off.
Right.
This is what's going on right now. And so the people that would, that are the supporters that have been seeing my stuff and stuff, like, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And it was cool because humans came out. Humans supported. Like one of the volunteers brought me like some lidocaine patches. Like, oh yeah, I do therapy and stuff in here. Just see if that helps. I'm like, oh my god, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm sure there was some fear there of being vulnerable. Being like, oh man, like I'm not going to be able to give these people the experience that they paid money to come and see. People traveled from Seattle or Europe to come here to San Diego, and going and being like honest with yourself and being like, I can't do this right now, or I'm not able to, like I'm truly uncomfortable, and stepping away from that I think is actually like an important part of trying to make all this stuff work. And again, I think it's like the idea of burnout, especially with YouTubers and all that kind of stuff, is really common because maintaining that level of
Oh, I can't
energy.
imagine.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think it's one of the like downsides of it is people they have this like parasocial relationship with you where they only see one side. And in spite of everything else happening in your life, you still have to, maintain that energy. Because like at the end of the day, no matter what, we're still lucky to be able to get the, have the chance to be able to do what we do.
Yeah. And I'm not saying YouTubers change, and they're a different character like actors, but there is like a heightened sense of awareness, a heightened sense of how you're engaging with people because it is YouTube. You have to engage across the screen.
Right.
But then when you don't show that same amount of intensity or energy when you're seeing someone just like on the street or at a con, people are like, oh,
yeah,
the same.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of disappointing.
It's still me, but
right. Well, and I think that's another. Like, I think hero worship is pretty common in the art education sphere. I mean, artists in general.
Oh yeah, the art heroes and everything, of course.
Well, and I think it's like it's like you see these people that you watch on YouTube or these great teachers or something, and you meet them in person, and it's like, oh, that's just a guy, and it's scary from two perspectives. I think it's good and bad from two perspectives. Like, for someone who's doing that for the first time, meeting their art hero, it's like, oh man, like that's just a person. He's not this god. He's not this like heroic figure or something.
Yeah.
And then the other like good realization is like, oh man, he's a person. Like I could do that too. Like in spite of all this, like, I don't mean in terms of like being able to copy their style exactly, but in times of like, in spite of all their suffering and all their like all the stuff happening in their personal life, they still find time to create art.
Yeah.
And and do a good job with it and stuff.
Yeah, I forget who told me, who gave me the specific advice, but it's basically give someone 2 chances at least.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what they were going through. Maybe that one time you met them, they're a little bit off because something may have happened.
Right.
Don't hold it against them. Don't think that that's how they always are.
Absolutely.
But, give them another chance. Case in point, there was one convention where I was lucky to be seated next to Mike Mignola and his wife.
Yeah.
And he was super cool. It wasn't like he was going out of his way with anyone near us or going out of his way with all of his fans, but he was, nice. He was cool. And then there one person came up and just critiqued one of his books, one of his, comics, like saying what he didn't like about it.
Yeah.
And then Mike was like, really? You waited in line to tell me all of this?
Yeah.
No. And so to be the person right after that, that's my point. That sucks.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because it's like, now you're getting kind of an agitated Mike,
right? And
it wasn't your fault. It wasn't his fault. It was the person in front of you.
Right.
Thankfully, that guy saw it and was like, I don't know what was up with that guy.
Yeah.
And, Mike was nicer to him. But things like that, it's just like...
Absolutely. Well, and again, I think it's part of the, like, I think a good piece of advice I once got is like, don't base anything off like unconfirmable thoughts. It's like there's nothing anyone can say to you that like I understand that when people say things it's hurtful and all that kind of stuff, whether it be about your art or personality or whatever,
of course.
But it's like the more that you can like step away from looking for external validation as the only source of feeling good about yourself, I think the more likely you are to be not just a fully realized artist, but like a fully realized human being as well.
It's tough though, because especially as artists, you're not going to get really like a critique from a relative or a friend unless they're their artist or a teacher or whatever. So growing up, I think for I'm just speaking from my experience, the only validation you got was if someone said, "Oh yeah, that looks exactly like what you were drawing. That's great." Or, "Oh, that doesn't look like that."
Right.
Okay. Oh, okay, whatever. So you were getting validation for yourself. You were having fun doing it, but then when you showed someone else, then it was just like, "Oh, yeah, okay, there's my letdown."
Right.
So we're born. We're kind of bred on it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Up with it.
I mean, I feel like it's human. It's a strange thing because I think that like the act of wanting followers and wanting approval and then not getting it is like a total like it's a human response to be disappointed by people not liking what you do because we're social creatures and we'd like to communicate and we'd like to have approval and be validated.
Exactly.
But it's like that inherently is not bad, but I think it's inherently bad to have 100% of your self-worth to be derived from all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I was talking to Steven Zapata about this, and he's on the whole like anti-AI debate thing, and he's very much invested into it. Like he's going to DC,
Yep.
all of his content or a lot of his content is about AI and stuff. And, but he's like, if this stuff loses, I'm still going to keep drawing. I still have like my dog and my wife and my family and my friends and stuff. And it's like, it's not like he's staked every single thing on this hill to die on, and it's a strange thing when I hear about people being mean to people like Mike Mignola or something,
I mean, just, some people are just like that, and there's nothing you could really do or say. And it goes back to what we're saying: you can't please everybody.
Yeah,
I mean, there are going to be those people out there, but it's just like, really, just don't be that troll and just stand there. Like, just go away, so I could talk to other people that I actually want to engage with,
interact with.
Can't control that.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, I think a big part of this as well is like, like going back to the idea that most things, even for successful people, do fail. Like, you could look at any famous musician or artist or whatever and be like, okay, this isn't the piece that they're known for. You know, for like Beethoven, there's like, I don't know how many symphonies he wrote, but like 2 or 3 are the most popular, like the
one that everyone knows.
Yeah, but then everything, like actually, like most of his work, like 90% of his work is just completely unknown.
That's all social media is.
Yeah, right.
It's like you see 1% of what the artist is actually doing.
Yeah.
There's like all the stuff that they're going through, and I think that's where any type of influencer or even us artists, for however large a following you have, it doesn't matter. Sometimes they'll post process, sometimes, but mainly it's just like finished stuff.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I got. Cool. There it is. And so I felt that was like a burnout for me.
Yeah.
Just always having to be, everything's perfect when I post it.
Right.
So, it's silly, but I call it Mondays are for me.
Yeah.
So this year, every Monday, I'm posting a sketch. Mm-hmm. And I don't care if it's 5 minutes, 45 minutes, if it's like half-assed, if it doesn't make sense, if it whatever. And all of them don't get any really views or likes.
Right.
And it's part of me is like, oh, that sucks. But the other part of me is like, well,
who cares? Yeah, who gives a shit?
Just do it.
Right.
And so it's gotten me a little bit more in a healthier space about posting and just even getting back into sketching a bit more. And I think it kind of goes back to the very early days of everyone getting on the speed painting. Hey, it's 20 minutes, look what I did. And you're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Half of those weren't 20 minutes. Yeah. Like, people were just lying. I did this in 20 minutes. Yeah. The other half, they were just damn good. They were 20-minute speed paints.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think people literally lie a lot of the time. And I was talking to Bryce about this. Like the art brain and business brain and social media brain are like all completely different.
Yeah, they have to be.
One, and it's like I've been paying attention to like how, like, specifically, I'm like focusing not on the art, just on the like, okay, how do I grow as fast as possible? And I'm like making some reels that are getting some actual like real traction, like 100,000 views, or I've been helping out some friends and it's like, oh, I made something, I got like 800,000 views or something. And it was purely focused on like, not the art at all. It was focused on like the algorithm and like focusing on saves and watch time, using weird tricks and like, like weird graphics and all that kind of stuff to get people to actually watch as long as possible. So showing to more people. And the art is not necessarily great or anything. It's just that thing stood out because a robot arbitrarily chose it. And I think a lot of people might like look at their stuff not being chosen by the robots and being like, oh, this is a direct value judgment of me and my quality, when it's just like, it's like almost completely out of your control, It
is. When Instagram first started, like maybe back 2013, 2014, that was actually legit. Like, people seeing it, following growth, all that stuff.
Right.
That was legit.
Yeah.
Now, like you were saying, we all know that, but it's still hard to like separate. Oh, the algorithm.
Yeah.
I'm doing this, but I tried this and this didn't work.
Right.
So, for me, it's like I need to create something or do something where I'm not just dependent on that.
Yeah.
Because the algorithm's always going to change. They're always going to charge you for a certain thing. They're always going to have these tricks. But what is something that I can have control of? What is something that, people will still, look at my stuff and find me and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Part of it is like conventions. The algorithm doesn't control that. I'm out there. They see you're out there, or whoever's out there. They see you there. Like, okay, cool. And the other part is, getting a newsletter. Sounds archaic.
Yeah.
Sounds old school, but people see them still a lot more than now social media stuff.
Absolutely.
Fortunately.
Well, I was talking to a guy about this, and I was like a little bit on the like, oh, I hate newsletters, I never use them and stuff. But in terms of like actual business stuff, like the pure business side is, if you have a big Instagram following, only like a small 10% of your population, of your audience actually sees what you're putting out. Yep. Whereas like with a newsletter, literally 100% of people on your newsletter will open, like they're at least being sent whatever thing. They might not open, like 100% might not open, but
it's out there.
Yeah,
it's sent,
it's out there.
It's
right?
back, but it's sent at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like looking at it that way is like, like having more direct control. Like you literally have direct control over your audience. It's not like going through a third party company to show your Instagram posts or YouTube videos or something. And and I think the benefit of that is it like gives you a lot of stability with your audience. I think it gives you like a realistic idea of how many people are actually tuning into what you're trying to say and do.
Oh yeah, and you can you do see results. You see people. I got the first one I sent out for the year. I haven't done one in years.
Yeah.
But this year I was like, no, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And I got a few emails from people saying, I totally forgot you did this.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was subscribed to this. But okay, cool. This is cool. I like it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there is things like, okay, cool. People are reading this.
Yeah.
People are going to look forward to the next one.
Right.
So I think that as an artist taking time to do that, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Felt good.
Yeah, but with the business stuff as well, it's like, the only way that you start making money as an artist is if you actually start trying to sell pieces,
Mm-hmm.
Like I think there's a disconnect where like, again, like the quality of the art is often not really correlated to how many people really want to buy it, for Stan, I was talking to him about how many prints he sold on his website. And do you want to take a wild guess at how many prints total he sold?
Just last year? Or
No,
total?
Total.
Is this like prints of like some of his
his
work?
Yeah. His like academic art.
Few thousand?
No, less.
500?
Less.
Oh wow.
Like,
100.
Like 10.
Oh wow.
Like 10 prints. Well, and it's like people might look at him as like millions of subscribers, this really big artist, but it's because he just doesn't promote it. He doesn't talk about it.
Yeah.
That's not what people buy. That's not what people like know him for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just the act of him asking for people like, oh, buy my tutorials. Oh, here I'm having this thing about education and all that kind of stuff. That branding is actually the thing that gets his business going. Like the ask and you shall receive stuff. Yeah. That's the thing that actually gets him there versus the like putting it out there and just kind of like letting it exist on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people wouldn't have businesses if they didn't go to conventions. If they didn't make YouTube videos telling people that they're selling something.
Yeah, I mean you have to get eyes on it. I mean, you can make something, it's the most beautiful thing, but if no one sees it, no one sees it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the hard truth.
Right.
That's it. And it's what makes or breaks businesses. So I mean, when something does go viral, great, ride it out.
Right.
But when it's not going viral, that's when you have to get back to work.
Back
to absolutely. Like whatever that grind is.
Well, and it's purely the business stuff and like thinking objectively about what audience am I trying to hit and what am I actually trying to do here versus like what do I want to create specifically?
Yeah, and I think that's the hard part now. I mean, you can make anything. You can do anything. You could put it on this. You could put it on that. But I talked to a few other people about this, or I always talk to my wife about this. Is like when I'm creating stuff, whether it be prints or merch, I want to make sure that it's not just like, oh, I can put it on this and I can put it on that, but that there's something behind it. I don't have keychain. I don't have the keychains. I made this because I needed a keychain. If you like it too, cool.
Yeah.
This other thing that I'm doing, and it sounds really out there, but I'm collaborating on a candle with a friend. It's like a candle. Well, I have candles on when I draw because it zens me out.
Right.
It like gets me in that creative zone.
Yeah.
So my friend was like, "You want to make one for me?" I'm like, "I don't know how to make one, but if you can help me, that's cool."
Absolutely. Yeah.
So again, things that have something a little bit behind it. There's a story. There's something where story not just to sell it, but story. But, I actually use this thing.
Yeah,
and I actually
context.
want you to use it.
Absolutely.
I actually want you to like get in that peaceful state.
Right.
For drawing or creating. And Are you going to do that with everything? It's hard.
Yeah.
Try to.
Right.
Try to as much as possible, because then that's what makes it that genuine. I do care about my audience, which I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad they buy this stuff, but I also want to make sure that what I create, there's enough story and thought behind it that it's not something that they're just going to buy at a superstore or something.
Yeah. Well, and I in general, I think it's easy to, like, a common thing I hear is like, oh man, they already sell this stuff at Hot Topic, or they already sell art prints, or they sell whatever online for cheaper. You know, there's like people doing it better than me, but like no one's doing it in your exact way. You know.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, again, the goal as like an independent artist is to exist in a niche where people like what you're doing versus trying to, you know, fit into exactly what like a specific mold might be.
Like, I mean, that's why Disney's having such a hard time. They're trying to please everybody in the whole world. And
absolutely.
That's hard.
Yeah,
that's impossible.
Yeah, it's literally impossible. Yeah. Well, and it's like most people actually, like, I think, for like, if you're in Disney, you might think that Disney is the biggest media company in the world. But I would suspect most people, well, first of all, most people won't go to Disneyland on the planet, you know? And then most people, like, realistically might not even know what Disney is, you know? Including, like, all the other countries and cultures and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, like, most people aren't actually on the internet or something. Mm-hmm. It's like...
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The actual numbers?
Yeah. Like when you, like...
When you look at that scale.
Well, and it's like, to us, the internet is like the biggest thing. It's like the internet includes everything. It's like most of the planet might not actually be exposed to that thing, you know? And it's obviously huge, and it's like nihilistic to be like, oh, it's too big to, you know. But I think it's also important to like be okay with whatever scope that you're operating at.
I know.
And to realize that, like, I in some sense, I like optimistic nihilism. Like, it's the world is too big to... And your life is too short to pay attention to, like, every single thing. So you have to, like, find your own path and figure out, you know, what you actually genuinely care about.
No, I think that's great. I like that a lot. It's just harder now because of the internet. You have access to all this information. It's like you get desensitized by so many things now. Like, oh, there's this happening. Oh, wait, then there's this happening. There's that, and then people are just like, oh well, it's gonna happen again. Whatever it may be. But
yeah.
So then it is kind of like, okay, well then, what's important to you? Yeah, you go back to that.
Right.
Come like, okay, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
What do you want to put out there?
Well, in general, I think it's actually incredibly simple. You know, like I talk to a lot of convention artists, and I'm really interested by it because, like, you know, you see a lot of convention artists, and I'm not trying to sound patronizing or anything, but it's like people drawing anime boys for a living and making good money. You know, they're able to buy a house or something.
Yeah.
And it's like drawing anime boys, you know, and it's like, that's amazing. And it's like every single piece of advice, if you were to ask any business person, like any traditional business person, they'd be like, oh, you shouldn't do that. That's a horrible idea, you know? But, and you know, there's a sense of a little bit of a survivorship bias there. But, you know, I think it's like, there are people that do actually make it, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's, you know, it's rare-ish, but I think to get to that path, it's like really just a mindset shift, mostly, to me, I think.
It's a combination of stubbornness and ego.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a bit kind of what it boils down to. The ego to like, no, I can do what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm as good as that.
Right.
Even though you're not.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you want to compare yourself
Being
to the
naive,
people.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to compare yourself to the people at the top of their game because that's the competition. That's the mountain peak. Like, oh, got to get up there. Even if you fall short, at least it's like you were striving for like that greatness, quote unquote greatness,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And then the stubbornness to just keep going. Like, for me, this is all I knew.
Yeah.
Like, there was no plan B. There was no fallback. It was just something. It always had to do with art.
Yeah.
Maybe I had to get a job at a Trader Joe's or at a Best Buy, and that I was so close to doing that because I needed to pay rent.
Yeah.
But I didn't because I would land in a job that had some art to do with it, and then it would be good. And then I would be like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? Right. But I think that's the part is stubbornness, and then just that persistence, consistency.
Absolutely. Well, and for this podcast, for me, it's like I genuinely want to have a conversation with you and I want to talk to you about this stuff. So it's already a success to me. It's not like, you know, if it gets 5 views or whatever, you know, but like the chance to like sit down with you and have this conversation is something that I actually want to do. And if I were to only base the metric of success of this podcast of how many views is it going to get?
Yeah.
Then it's inevitably going to fail, from that lens of success and failure.
Yes, how you frame it.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
important.
Absolutely.
I mean, framing things, that's everything, but it's hard to get into that healthy space of, framing it within context, framing it here, because, again, there are metrics that we're used to framing things like, okay, income-wise, how much did this make, or views-wise, how much did this get, or how many people are talking about it. Right. It's helpful. Yeah. A lot of those things are definitely helpful, but like we're discussing, and I've discussed it with other people, if you worry about that too much too early on, then you're not going to be that artist that you want to be. Yeah.
When you let too many people influence the thing that you're trying to create, and that's inevitably going to happen to some degree. But I mean, I've talked to artists about this, and they'll say that the happiest time as an artist was when they were a student, because they had as little. Yeah, they could just do whatever they want. Yeah, literally, no external motivation at all. Like, no need to make money generally, or no need to please an art director or something, or an audience. And in a lot of ways, it's like the most authentic you could be. But I think it in some ways it's harder to be an artist nowadays. In the sense that that lens to compare yourself to other people is a lot louder than it ever has been with social media.
Well, it's also curated for you. Yeah, it's like the algorithm telling you what you want to see, right? Based off of like here or like there, and everything it just feels like kind of homogenized. It's all this kind of the sameness, right? Because the algorithm's saying, "Oh, you like this? Oh, then you're going to like this and this and this." And especially on Instagram, that's what I've noticed, especially with the Explore page. It's like a lot of art that's all the same. It's cool, but it's like, I want something a little different. I want to go out there and look for different things. And I was very fortunate to take during my grad studies a history of illustration class. Yeah. And I knew some of the artists, but there are other artists within that scope that we studied that were just like, oh, wow, this is where everyone's basing a lot of their art of. Yeah. And I think that's something that people should go back to, especially if they want to get fresh ideas, is actually going to a museum, going to an exhibition. Because, I mean, it's still curated, but I'm sure it's not curated with a lot of stuff you've seen before because it's not on the internet. It's done from the past. So that stuff I love.
I believe if you really search for it, there's essentially an infinite amount of inspiration around you at all times. Mm-hmm. And I talked about this before, but you could look at a leaf and find an entire, life in just the structure of a leaf or something. Mm-hmm. How to study photosynthesis or the cultural significance of that tree being planted there and all that kind of stuff. And or it's just a leaf.
Yeah.
And I think there's when you walk down the street, you only pay attention to a certain amount of things, and the more you the more you are distracted with bills or followers or any of that kind of stuff, the less likely you are to see that purpose in a single beautiful thing like a leaf. Mm-hmm. And it you obviously can't look at everything and you can't be everything, but there's an amazing amount of complexity all around us at all times. And
that's why the thing that I always tell my students early on is just always have a sketchbook on you. Yeah. Just keep it on you, even if you don't think you're going to use it. Think of your sketchbook as your phone. When you leave the house, do you feel naked without it? And I'm at that point, I bring my sketchbook everywhere. Sometimes I'll feel, sometimes I won't even draw on it, but at least I have it in case I do want it. So it's one of those things where I'd rather have it and need it than not have it when I want it.
Yeah, right. Well, and it's the act of trying to make an environment where you're always able to be curious. Mm-hmm. I think it's trying to remove as much friction as possible to creativity. Yeah, because you really have no idea when something's going to hit you.
Mm-hmm. And I'm guilty of being on my phone too much or pulling it out instead of my sketchbook. But I'm always trying to remind myself that instead of reaching for my phone, try to reach for your sketchbook if there's something grabbing you. I'm not going to say it's always 100% success, right? But getting better, getting better. But again, it's just what's going to distract you from your goal. You can't eliminate all the distractions, but try to find the ones that are really taking you away from your goal so that you can at least pause that somehow, so that you have that time to focus.
Well, I was talking to Peter about this, and I really I don't know if I believe in the complete idea of free will, where it's you really don't choose what you value. It's no matter what, sugar and candy is pretty awesome, and at some point it's going to be okay, it's too awesome to pass up. Yeah. And I think it's you don't decide your gender, where you're born, how much money you're born with, where you go to school, who your friends are growing up, and like arguably things that like make up most of your personality are completely out of your choice.
Which is scary.
Well,
Yeah.
but like you can make those little nudges, and I think that's all we are. That's all we're trying to do as humans is like to trying to reduce the friction to creating art or exercising or reading a book or something, and like making ourselves better. And I think the more friction you have in between the things that you want to do and the things that you're doing, the less likely you are to be, like you're where you're at was just a series of very small decisions day by day that led to where you are. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to be a convention artist when you were like 5 years old. It was like, I guess I'll do art. Oh, I like this kind of like, I like, drawing on Photoshop, or I like doing traditional stuff. I don't like 3D as much, or whatever, and it's like that led you to where you are right now, and it was, and I believe it was all just those little nudges towards creativity, over, however long you've been alive for.
I mean, it's similar to parenting.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to be able to control who he's friends with, my son's friends with. I'm not going to be able to control kind of the environment at school that he's going to be in, but trying to help him make choices that are going to benefit him.
Yeah.
That's all I can really do. And showing him, like, probably don't want to do that. Okay, you did it. You failed. What did you learn?
Right.
And it's it flows, from being a parent to doing art.
Yeah.
Similar but different, but still very similar in that, is this going to work? I don't know. I hope it works.
Right. Well, and I guess as individuals, the only thing that we're trying to do is like do the same thing for ourselves. Like, oh, that worked, that didn't work. Like, forgive ourselves. Like, like trying to treat ourselves almost like children. In the sense of like, if suddenly we were put into really bad environments, creating art might be a lot harder.
Yeah.
Knowing that if we surround ourselves with like good people and clean our rooms and do all this stuff, we're a lot more likely to be doing the things that we know we want to do.
Yeah.
But it's those gentle nudges in ourselves that get us there, versus the like being a tyrant or something.
Well, I mean, that's why people always work with the same crew, whether it be like movie productions or whatever, things like that. Like, oh yeah, I'm always going to work with that crew. Like, why do you work with the same people? How come you don't get anyone new? Because it's healthy.
Yeah.
Everything gets done. We're all creative. It's a team. I know what to expect. I don't have to babysit.
Right.
And we get things done.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can't blame people for just hiring the same people. It's not like nepotism or anything. It's just because, we're all good together.
Absolutely. Well, and that sense of security is what we're all really looking for.
Yeah.
And it's like that creative environment and that ability to trust, like, in like a movie, like, oh, that guy is like the grip, and he does that really well, and I don't know anything about that. So, I could focus purely on being creative in my own, wherever I'm most creative at.
And I think that sense of security, as an artist, you have to realize you're not going to find that with a big company.
Yeah.
Because the sense of security there is none. It's basically, are you doing your job? Are you kicking butt? Oh, we have to cut staff.
Yeah.
That's stuff that's not under your control.
Right.
But you doing your own art, doing your own thing, that's the security you can create for yourself.
Absolutely. And again, that to me is like actual sustainability, and actual creativity is like when your livelihood and all that kind of stuff is tied to how, like, your job, and when it's threatened by quarterly earnings of things that you didn't, you have no control over, or a new executive or something, it's easy to shift what you're trying to do because there's like, the value of what I'm trying to do is judged by how much money it's making for the company directly.
Yep.
It's easy to shift what your priorities are in those sorts of
And that's where you do have to somehow split yourself. Like, that's actually the job of an artist.
Right.
And you'll hear a lot of, different mentors and different teachers say, have your own project.
Yeah.
And that's the exact reason why, is because it's yours. It's your baby. No one's telling you anything what to do. So you kind of live and die on your own merits.
Yeah.
On the things that you're putting into it. So if it's not succeeding, you're like, are you really putting enough into it? No? Well, then put enough into it.
Right.
So you have to decide, you have your quote unquote day art job, and then you have the thing that you love to do.
Yeah.
Like, how are you building those things up?
Absolutely. And you get to a point where you are marrying the two, and it's like it does take a lot of time and effort and trial and error, and
that's the part that can't be taught.
Yeah.
That's just time.
Right.
Where they say time heals all wounds. It's true.
Right.
It sucks, but it does.
And I was talking to Bryce about this, like when like when you're pushed, like when you're in like a sandbox when you're 5 years old and you drop an ice cream cone, that is literally the worst thing that's ever happened to you, you know? And you cry and you scream and you throw a tantrum and stuff. And I think when bad stuff happens to us now, that's like, you know, the worst thing that's ever happened to us. You know, that's all it is. It's like, in some sense, our emotions are doing the same thing as the 5-year-old dropping their ice cream. Because, you know, bad stuff happens to everybody. It's just our exposure to it and that comfort, you know. And it feels really bad in the moment and it's really painful. But yeah, like at a certain point, you will be able to understand it and learn from whatever that bad experience.
It's always hindsight.
Yeah.
Okay, it wasn't that bad, I guess.
Yeah, that sucks, but I survived. You know? And I don't want that to happen again, but I still survived, you know.
Yeah, I mean, my leg, it's you know, still in progress, but that was over 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And when I think about how it was in July, that was the worst point. That felt like the worst point in my life.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, I can't get out of bed.
Right.
I was using a cane for Pete's sake. I'm like, oh my God, why am I using a cane? It's not even cool.
Yeah.
It's not even a Gandalf cane. Well, come on.
Yeah.
And now when I look at it, I'm like, yeah, that was rough, but well, now it's already almost going to be a year going into the 2024. So
right. Yeah. Right. Cool. We've been going for about 56 minutes. Is there anything else you want to talk about, or?
No, I mean it was cool. It was like it was a fun conversation. It was just like, anything else you want to?
I don't know. I mean, in general, it feels silly sort of talking about this stuff because it seems like, and Peter said this too. It's like everyone kind of has the same answers to all this stuff. Like, trust yourself. Like, take time. Like, be patient with yourself. And the act of being creative is like, it's more of like a conversation with yourself than it is, you know, a set of like hard plan to being successful. You know, and like you have no idea what you're going to be when you first start out, but you start and just kind of figure it out as you go.
I definitely think also having at least one or two other people that are in the arts that you can have healthy conversations with. Yeah. That could be real with your work and say, kind of like that, but why don't you try this? Right. And you actually listen to them. Yeah. Because I have friends where they'll recommend something and be like, whatever. Yeah. And then I'll have friends that recommend something like, oh yeah. So a lot of times, the friends that recommend stuff aren't even artists. Yeah. They'll just be like, oh, I don't know what it is, but that doesn't work. And my wife's one of them that's really good at it. She'll be like, something feels off. And I get angry. Yeah. Because like, no, use your art words. Yeah, right. She has none. But then it makes me think like, oh, okay, I can push this a little bit more. Right. So I think having the people that just won't say, oh, that's so cool. I mean, it's nice to have that. Right. But you also need someone to give you that nudge and be like, something's off. Or, it's not your best. I'm like, okay, fine. Well,
and people that you genuinely trust as well.
Yes.
It's like there might be people that might go too far with critique in a way that is like trying to tear someone, like the unsolicited advice or something, you know. And I think it's important to, like when somebody tells you something, to be able to say no if you actually genuinely disagree with what they're saying.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've done that a lot of times. One of my closest art friends, Tony, you know, he's a great comic book artist. He'll be like, why don't you try this? I'm like, oh, no, it's actually going for that. He's like, oh, okay, I see that now. All right. Yeah. And we go back and forth a lot. But it's healthy and it helps both of us grow. And it's like we know that we could trust each other about that stuff, like you said. Right. So that's hard to find. But when you find that, keep that close. Because it's not just an art friendship. It's just like someone that you'll be friends with for life.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's like all art is just trying to... it's just trying to communicate ideas, you know. Mm-hmm. And again, I think trust yourself, and the more you're able to trust yourself, either through pure sheer ignorance and arrogance, or through genuine faith in yourself, or it's just a mix of two.
It's a mix.
Which is the
it's
mix
honestly
of two.
A mix, and it may be hard for some people to like, oh really? You guys are just making everything up and saying everything is everything. It is.
I mean, yeah, Star Wars was somebody's idea, you know. That like somebody sat in a room and was like, "Oh, it'd be cool if people had light swords and stuff."
Samurais with light swords and lasers. That'd be cool.
Flash Gordon in space. Yep. Flash Gordon with light swords and stuff. And that's all. You know, how should people follow you? Sorry,
well, Instagram, Patrick Ballesteros. That's my first and last name, and then my website's patrickballesteros.com. Sweet. And then there, if they want, they can subscribe to that newsletter that I talked about.
Sweet. Cool. Well, I appreciate it, man.
Yep.
Thanks. Cool. I will cut it there. Thanks, everybody.